What would you'd mentioned, a history of kind of disordered eating. I mean, was it like anorexic type thing, bulimic type things, or was it just
It was anorexia, it was bulimia. It was also just restrictive growing up since I was like 11 or 12. I think I had what you would probably describe as an eating disorder throughout that, really till I discovered carnivore. It was just different styles of having struggles, never really understanding why. I was open to trying it. This was a little while ago. I was like, okay, what the heck? Let's try it. Just had meat. And from that, I realized like I was always full. I felt like I could just eat whenever I wanted to, which was a new freedom for people that have had a history of eating disorders. As a result, I felt great, looked great. My skin was great. I lost 10 pounds in that month without any effort and have been doing it ever since.
we have Lauren here today. It's good to have you. Where are you located?
I'm actually in Denver, Colorado, though I do live in Austin. I'm kind of back home right now for the holidays.
Well, let's get started here. So why don't you just kind of just tell us a little bit about who you are and what's going on? And I guess you've got a success story you want to share with us. So let's get started with that.
So I actually came from a very strange food disordered pattern myself. Growing up since I was like 11 or 12, I think I had what you would probably describe as an eating disorder throughout that period of time until I discovered carnivore. It was just different styles of having struggles, feeling satisfied with food, never really understanding why. It was sort of funny that I came across carnivore because my friend sort of just tried it for a month. They just heard about it, I think, through online, and I was open to trying it. This was a little while ago. So I just did it for a month. I was like, okay, what the heck? Let's try it. And just had meat, just completely carnivore, not animal based or anything like that, which I know is another thing. And from that, I realized like I was always full. I always felt full. I felt like I could just eat whenever I wanted to, which was a new freedom for people that have had a history of eating disorders, or even just like hearing the classic lose weight stuff or stay fit stuff. Like you're just kind of taught to restrict your food a little bit. And so having just the ability to eat whatever I wanted, kind of when I wanted, was huge. And having access to just not needing to count calories was massive. So I basically spent that month experiencing what it felt like to just have a normal relationship to food. And I ended up eating as much as I wanted all the time. And as a result, I felt great, looked great. My skin was great. I lost 10 pounds in that month without any effort, and basically have been doing it ever since.
You'd mentioned, a history of kind of disordered eating. I mean, was it like anorexic type thing, bulimic type things, or was it just, I don't know, what kind of dietary? Did you try the plant-based strategy? Everybody seems to like to do that. Did you do any of those things?
It was anorexia, it was bulimia. It was also just restrictive, I guess you could say. So there was stages, right? So at one point I was 100 pounds at 5'8" when I was going into college, ended up dropping out of college. I'm now 145. So I was about 50 pounds, 45 pounds lighter than I am today. And I'm pretty lean today. So that was my biggest stage of anorexia. Going into, another part of my later years, I think it was bulimia for like a year. But then it was just kind of always having a weird relationship to food. There wasn't really a title you could put to it. It was just not normal. It just constantly on my mind, constantly trying to make sure I was watching what I was eating, how much of it, counting calories, just obsessive thinking.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting because I think a lot of people, when we try to adapt to a diet that humans are not adapted to, and this is this modern diet, I would argue that this is not our natural diet, and trying to figure out how to remain healthy or sane or at a reasonable body composition is a very challenge. And so you have to many people have to do these sort of difficult things. Like what kind of foods? I mean, you said you restricted things or you felt bad about, how did that work? What kind of things would you avoid, or how would you deal with it? Let's say if you ate something you weren't supposed to, did you get guilt racked, or what was going on with that?
It's funny when you have a eating disorder, you tend to you eat less, but you kind of have more sugar, I would say, because it's fast, it gives you quick energy. So it would be more things that were like candy, here and there, like every couple hours have like one candy, right? And it's not like you're thinking actively that you're doing that. It's just kind of what you become. Having like some cheese sticks, or like whatever you'd have your morning, right? It seems really pretty normal, like bacon and eggs, right? It's pretty normal. But then you spend the next 8 hours not eating. And if you feel like you want to eat, you pop a candy, maybe. or have a diet soda or something like that. And it gives you that quick, fast boost of energy and makes you feel full and kind of tricks your mind into thinking that it's getting something. And then, have some fruit. That's good sugar. But the thing was, it was never a conversation to have protein. That was what was so interesting about this, is like, it was always the conversation, to your point in your videos a lot. It's like salads, particularly women are taught a lot of the time to have salads, just things that like a bit, veggies, that kind of stuff, versus just have a steak and enjoy the steak, and in my mind, that I was lifting weights too. So in my mind, it was all wrong. I was like, oh, if I have a lot of protein though, and I'm lifting 5 days a week, 6 days a week, I'm going to get really bulky, which takes a lot more effort than we think it will. But that was more what I was going toward, was just kind of the quick sugars without realizing it, one big meal a day, and then maybe supplementing with some cheese or some fruit here and there throughout the day.
I mean, most people say cheese, fruit's not that bad, overall. I mean, for most people. Let me ask you, did you have any, like, outside of this sort of disordered eating behavior that you described, were there any other health issues? I mean, skin, cognitive, mental capacity, cognition, mood, anything going on, joint pain, or anything like that was going on?
Totally. Yeah. I didn't have joint pain. I'm kind of one of those people where I can eat pretty much what I want and feel okay. Well, there's some people that really, really, really suffer, like they can't actually function. So I sort of like functioned at a pretty steady baseline of just feeling all right. When I started eating carnivore, my mood shot up. I needed fewer hours of sleep. So I would wake up at like 6 in the morning without an alarm after going to bed at like midnight and feel great. Whereas before I was groggy, would wake up super groggy. When I was anorexic going into college, I ended up dropping out of college because my mood was so all over the place. My anxiety was always at a 10. It was like fight or flight all the time. And I couldn't sleep at all. And that was years ago, right? So it's kind of like, that was a very serious stage. Up into the recent years, it wasn't quite like that, right? But that said, up into the recent years before carnivore, mood was still fluctuating up and down a little bit. I've always had eczema, and rosacea on my skin. Rosacea particularly would be just like cheeks and stuff, right? And that completely went away doing just 1 month. My skin, I noticed, was really, for lack of a better word, just radiant. And that's on my face, and then also just all over body, right? Everywhere, legs, arms, just cleared up from carnivore. And then, like I said, the mood was good. The sleep was good. So I had a lot of positive changes. Luckily, I didn't have any joint pain or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, and you look, I mean, looking at you, look at your skin, it looks healthy, you look healthy, you look radiant, you look like your skin looks nice, all the hair and everything looks pretty good to me from what I can tell on a video. But I'm just wondering, because a lot of people say, well, why didn't you just like go with a balanced diet and eat like, normal food, balanced fruit, vegetables, whole grains? Did you ever try that? Did it not work for you? What was the reason for it? Because a lot of people say, well, carnivore is very restrictive and extreme. Why would you have to go to that extreme? Why did you try those other things that just not work for you?
Yeah. So the funny thing, and this is what I sort of talk about a lot myself, in trying to tell people about carnivores, like if you have a disordered eating pattern, you're probably used to being restrictive anyways. So the thought of doing animal, like if you see other people succeeding with carnivore, it really doesn't seem, to me at least, it didn't seem like it was so hard because I was already restricting too much or had a lifestyle of doing that. So to answer your question, I had tried a bunch of those different things all over the years. When you have disordered eating patterns and it's just part of your life, and now I can say this objectively looking back, like it's just part of your life. So I had tried, not vegan, I didn't try that, but just more veggies, more fruit. I never felt full. I never felt full on anything. So it's just always annoying, because you're still supplementing with things like you're still calorie counting, you're still trying to feel full with just eating veggies and fruit and those other solutions. So I probably tried all of them, honestly, except for vegan. I didn't really ever try vegan. It just didn't appeal to me. And I didn't think it sounded very healthy. In my opinion, that's just what I didn't think or what I thought at the time. So yeah, I went through all of them and then saw the carnivore because it looked like it was working for my friend and it didn't seem all that restrictive because my lifestyle with food was restrictive anyways. So I was like, oh, sure, let's give this one a shot.
I mean, I don't know. I assume you have friends and family and relationships around you. I mean, what is a general? I mean, are you perceived as this is just nutty, crazy stuff, or are you getting some support here, or what's going on with that?
So I help a lot of people in my own right doing this. So I sort of have a little bit of a surrounding of people in that way. There's one or two people close to me outside of that are living a similar lifestyle. Outside of that, completely, yeah, you're perceived as weird, strange, extreme. To me, that's not something that's completely new. I stopped drinking alcohol when I was like 25 or 26, which at the time was a pretty weird thing to do. That was about 5 years ago too, when that wasn't really a very common conversation. So I'm familiar with that space. Now it's more, you don't drink and you're a carnivore, right? So it comes off to, I think people, they think that's like, whoa, she must have like an eating disorder big time or something, right? When in reality, it's actually the complete opposite. I've noticed that if you try to explain it to people, it's become more common, a little bit more here and there, but people have to be in a place to want to hear it, to explain it to them. Otherwise, it just completely goes over.
Yeah, it's just also with the alcohol thing, it's so common for somebody to do
Mhm.
that, and we've accepted it as kind of normal. But it's I mean, particularly drinking alcohol to excess is a real problem, and I think eating garbage food all the time is just as much of a problem, if not worse. It's probably more insidious. We have more people that are doing that, and so when you're like, I'm going to focus on high value, high nutrient, nutritious food rather than this processed cheap garbage that most of us eat. It can be, I don't know, I guess it's threatening. People don't like it when there is kind of holds up the mirror to them. So I'm eating this way because, people think, well, do you think you're better than me or something like that? I don't know. It's kind of funny with that. You're in Austin, Texas, you said. I mean, that's got to be a good place to be carnivore. I mean, I've been there many times. I went to college there at UT, and I know there's some great barbecue. So how hard is it being carnivore in the capital of Texas?
I would say Texas is probably one of the best places to do it. People are way more open about it there. So it's an interesting thing I have found from moving to Austin. It's a pretty progressive place in terms of just health and coaching and that sort of stuff. Being from Denver, I would say the contrast is pretty clear. Far more people in Austin are open to it and aware. Like when you say I'm going carnivore, I'm doing carnivore, like, oh, same, me too. Or, good for you, whatever. Whereas in Denver, it's like, what is that? Or like, dude, that's so unhealthy. I've heard like that's horrible. Meat's going to give you cancer. Have you heard the studies? Like very different environments. So very easy in Austin relative to other places to go carnivore for sure.
Yeah, and it is interesting, when you see, well, I mean, it is becoming more and more people have heard of this. When I wrote this book, The Carnivore Diet, several years ago, it was new. And I mean, there were a few people that knew about it, but it was largely unknown. And now many people that follow nutrition at least have heard of it. Most of and oftentimes in a negative light because that's how it's portrayed. But as we see more and more people getting healthier and healthier, it becomes hard to deny when we do
Totally.
that. So you said you started out pretty strict carnivore. How long ago? How long have you been doing it for, and where are you at now? What does your day-to-day diet look like these days, or what did it start as?
Probably like 8, 9 months now. It's been interesting. I actually was going to ask you your opinion of a couple of things if that was an option to do, but shifting more to, well, back and forth between carnivore and animal based, mainly just because sometimes I just want some sweet stuff. And that's just kind of not something that I've been testing to see what that's like for me, but started out very much strong carnivore, went a little bit more toward animal based, now back towards strong carnivore. That's really where it's at right now, but playing around a little bit. No, vegetables or anything like that still. So no grains. I don't really have dairy. I rarely have cheese. So it would probably be more just meat and fruit.
Well, I mean, as far as my opinion, I just tell people do what works for them. I mean, there's no reason you shouldn't experiment, see what works for you. Some people are able to incorporate other foods, including fruit and things like that, back in, and they do fine. Other people, it doesn't work for them. They try it for. I've seen a lot of people now because there's certainly people talking about eating fruit and all this stuff and honey and maple syrup and whatever. I see a lot of people that do that end up sort of figuring out that didn't really work for them well, but some people it works for them. So you just have to see what happens with you. You said you'd been lifting weights all this time and you felt that, the protein would make you too bulky, which I wish that were the case because I've been training 40 some years and still trying to put on muscle. It's hard. It really is hard. What's happened with your performance? Like as an athlete, as someone who's exercising, have you noticed that's gotten better for you, or what's the deal with that?
So I also run long distance sometimes. I'll do like trail running. So I noticed in the beginning, we'll talk about that first and then weightlifting. With trail running in the beginning, when I was shifting to carnivore, I think running outside in the sun, sweating, doing 10, 12 miles
Mhm.
is really hard on you with the electrolyte thing. So you really, in the beginning, when you're transitioning from my experience, have to add a lot of electrolytes before and after, maybe during your run, because you're just shedding all of that as you're going. It's my, I felt pretty sick, but then over time I adapted. So I was able to run distance, be totally fine and feel normal. As far as weightlifting, I actually felt just as sharp as before. And I looked better. So that was encouraging. When you're lifting and you see that you can actually see your muscles protruding because your lower body fat, at least for me, that was really the only change, was just the way I looked, but I felt sharper and better. And I wouldn't say more energy. I just didn't see that the energy decreased.
Yeah. So better body composition, equal performance, on and on.
Mhm.
What, as far as, you said you had this, I guess, history of restrictive eating or eating disorder where you probably have sort of kind of feel, I don't know, maybe you feel wrong about doing something and you feel like you're guilty or something. Is that gone away now completely with this diet now?
I would say, yeah, actually, I would say so. I mean, it's almost like it's worked in my favor in a way. A bit restrictive in history, like I can turn it now into a positive. I don't really crave anything else when I'm eating carnivore. So I don't feel this need to be restrictive. And if one looks at eating carnivore as restrictive, I mean, I don't know, I feel full and happy and satiated throughout the day. So that's enough for me.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it this way. I mean, a lot of people are restricting nutritious food. They feel guilty about it. Like, oh my God, I can only eat, I better have a small steak, not a big one. And they're always restricting that because they're worried about it. I think it's the opposite now. You just eat as much as you want. And that's, when you realize that that is a significant part of what makes up human beings is this, at least historically it was. And I think it makes it a lot easier. Do you cook at home mostly? Do you got to eat, or what's your? I mean, I know I find it like I don't like to go out to eat that much because it just costs too. It's just too expensive to eat what I want to eat. As far as if I'm going to eat 3 pounds of steak at a restaurant, I'm going to walk out of there with a $300 bill or something like that. So, what do you do? Do you cook a lot?
Yeah, I cook. That's my main thing. So I order meat in bulk. I avoid restaurants. I don't avoid them. I shouldn't say that. I prefer to eat what I'm cooking because I like it and it's cheap. So I'll have beef mainly, bacon, eggs, some steak here and there, liver sometimes, that sort of stuff. I have recently learned more about seed oils. Be curious about your input on that if you had any, but notice a lot of restaurants cook with canola oil, that's vegetable oils, and that's something that I'm trying to avoid. So for me, eating bacon, eggs, and beef pretty much daily has kind of been my go-to. I'm not sure what your take is on that nutrient wise. Is that enough in your opinion? And also, like, do you think the seed oils thing is worth avoiding?
Well, I mean, the seed oil topic is very controversial. I mean, certainly if you avoid that, if you make an effort to avoid seed oils, you're largely going to exclude all the processed foods out of your diet because it's literally in everything. And so the question is it actually the seed oil itself? Is it the fact that it's usually associated with processed food and a marker for processed food consumption? I don't know for sure. I mean, I think there's people that obviously are very, very down on that. And I think in general, if you're going to avoid seed oils, you're going to avoid most processed food. Now, if somebody cooks your steak in canola oil, is that significantly damaging you? I don't know. I don't know I don't usually worry about when I go to a restaurant. I don't go that often. So it's kind of like, it's so limited that doesn't make it a big deal. Now, if you're eating every single night in a restaurant, perhaps that would add up if it is a problem. And again, I think it's still controversial. I know there's a lot of people that are just absolutely, this is the worst thing in the world. And, because they'll always say, well, sugar is fine. It's just the seed oils and you can eat as much sugar as you want type of stuff, which I also disagree with. I think there's a limit to that as well. The
Mhm.
other question about, you said something about getting
Beef,
enough of
yeah.
something.
Beef is, so in your opinion, is it enough nutrition wise to have just beef, bacon, eggs,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
as kind of your daily
Oh
thing?
yeah, for sure. Absolutely. In my opinion, my experience, I mean, and my opinion is based on observing now thousands of people do just fine on that, as far as, I mean, is there a potential like some people their folate might be a little low? I haven't seen that be a significant actual clinical issue. I mean, like I said, there's a difference between blood values and what's actually going on clinically because the blood values don't always represent what's going on at the cellular or the tissue level. And so generally I think you can just eat straight up beef every day and nothing else and be fine. I mean, I've seen, and I've done
Mm.
that for years at a time. I know people have done that for many years. And so I think
Yeah.
for most people, I think it's generally a reasonable thing to do. I don't think you need to add in a lot of supplements or even organ meats. I know a lot of people think they're essential. My experience has been they're not. That's the data that Harvard University, shared that when they published their study on that. We collected data. People that ate organ meats, people that didn't eat organ meats, they both had the same outcomes. So I'm not
Cool.
I'm not all I'm not pushing for people to do that. If they want to, it's fine. If they like it, go for it. If they don't like it, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is don't spend your money on supplements. I think they're a huge ripoff. I think they're overpriced or marked. If you're gonna eat, if you think you need organ meats, just eat the organ meats. Don't spend money on the supplements. I'll just put that out there.
Unnecessary.
What is your fate? Are you preferencing a higher fat version? Do you focus on really fattier cuts, or how do you pattern your diet, or do you don't even think about that or care about it?
I don't try so hard to have like a specific measurement. I just know the more fat that I do have, the more full I usually feel, which obviously, makes sense. But with, beef, I guess I'll have like 80-20, something like that. And then I cook with tallow. So if I actually like having fat in there, it just tastes better to me. So I'll add a
Mhm.
little tallow in there and cook it with that. With eggs specifically, I cook them in the bacon grease. That's what I kind of go for. And yeah, I try to have a high fat diet. I just think that for me works best. Feel full, feel like I look better. I don't need to eat as much. I don't crave sugar as much when I have a higher fat
Mhm.
diet, if at all. Just feel like it's good for the body.
Yeah, no doubt we need fat, and the question is what each person needs and prefers. I think that, for some people, too much fat leads to some digestive issues. For some, they can't absorb it all. And some people, and it changes over time, I think. And, you can't go low fat on a carnivore diet. You'll starve. You'll be hungry all the time. So you need to have at least a moderate amount of fat, and for some people, even higher fat. And in fact, I think maybe women perhaps tend to generally gravitate to a slightly higher fat approach. And I think that's just because women tend to have a little bit more fat on their body than men. That's one of the differences between the two. And so women might just prefer a little bit more fat in the diet. Have you had any problems with the diet? Any negatives so far?
Not necessarily. I've had some people struggle with losing weight that I've talked to. Not personally for me. I lost 10 pounds in my first month without really even trying and eating more than I ever had, which was kind of the irony behind it. For me, I haven't really had any struggles on carnivore that I can think of, because it's pretty affordable with the food, what you buy, all that kind of stuff. If you just eat beef, that would be a struggle, but that hasn't been one. I guess one question I do have that's not really a struggle, but it's kind of gray areas. How much meat per day should one eat? Like, because I'm not really counting macros on this, obviously. So maybe more like a pound. I've heard like 1 gram per pound of body weight. So like if I'm 150, that would be enough for a day to measure, kind of relatively speaking. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, when you're referring to protein, protein intake, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of data that would support, a much higher protein amount than the RDA for sure, which is point eight grams per kilogram. Most people would recommend at least 50% to double that, which gets close to that 1 pound per pound of body weight. And some people use lean mass. Some people go higher, particularly if you're interested in putting on muscle, you might even go a little bit higher than that. So that's
Mhm.
it. I mean, my sort of thought is, particularly when people starting out, I say eat enough so you don't want the cupcakes or the pizza or the garbage. Just eat enough so you're full enough so you can avoid that stuff. And that works pretty well in the beginning just to get people over all those addictions, and then you can kind of play with it from there. But I think ultimately, I can't just say everybody needs to eat this amount. You have to kind of figure it out. You see what you do best with and what your goals are. Like I eat a higher protein diet than a lot of people on this thing, but I'm always trying to compete and train hard and put on muscle and put on strength,
Right.
despite the fact that I'm in this almost geriatric age at this point, but
Yeah.
it's still fun. So you are, I guess you're at home in Denver with me. Is it with your family or
Yeah.
are your parents like, what the heck are you doing? Are they, what's going on with that?
Well, kind of. My sister is actually, she's lived in another country for the last 10 or 12 years. So we've stayed in touch, obviously, been sisters, but I haven't lived with her until right now. And we've both separately, different continents, completely landed on carnivore slash looking into that lifestyle. So we're both here right now. And so parents are kind of just like rolling with it, seeing what we're doing. But I do have her as somebody else that's doing it with me and understands what's going on. And it's fascinating that we both kind of landed on this separately. And she's had her own nutrition. I mean, that was one of the things that validated this so much for me, is that she really studies this quite a lot, because she's had some health issues herself with her stomach and things like that. She actually, metal toxicities has been a thing that she's discovered. So she's really into this stuff, and she has landed on mainly like carnivore, and then kind of implementing maybe some fruits here and there on her own. And so did I. So yeah, there is a lot of support in that way. Anybody else that's not doing it, I don't really talk to them about it because they don't get it. They don't understand, because the language for so many years has been that red meat can give you cancer, right? And all these other things, high cholesterol. And so it's kind of combating that, I don't want to say brainwashing, but language that's been around for so long that it's almost a lost cause until they try it themselves. So kind of getting both.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Some people are so ideologically just set on what they want to do. It doesn't matter what you show them, what studies you show them, what results you show them. Even their own health, poor health, is not enough until a certain threshold, until their teeth start falling out or whatever it takes. They finally realize they're so depressed or whatever. They're unwilling to leave that. And it's interesting. So you and your sister kind of converge independently. So she had come to this before you or after you? When did she discover this?
About the same time, weirdly. So about the same time. So she was in Australia for the last 3 years. And I don't think it's big in Australia to do carnivore yet, not from what I hear. But we both moved back to Denver briefly for a couple months before we went to Austin. And we're both in this phase of like, wow, we recently discovered this thing. And then we just happened to be doing it at the same time. So what's interesting about that is that she has tried so many different things that it, in my opinion, further validated carnivore, because she really does investigate. And that's where all of her studies were pointing toward too.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's totally randomly you both came to the same conclusion. A lot of people are figuring that out. And so when
Yeah.
you I mean, were you guys like, when she shared it with you or you shared it with her, were they like, oh my gosh, I'm doing the same thing? Was it kind of
Yeah.
surprising?
Yeah, it was weird. It was really weird because I think she was surprised by me, because I had always had an eating disorder thing or whatever. And I think she was kind of like, oh my God, you're doing this too. Like that's sort of out of left field. And for me, I was surprised because her nutrition seemed to always to be so complex, so many different things, which is another benefit to carnivore. Honestly, it's like, it's just so simple. Finally, I was surprised by her, because wow, she's suddenly doing this thing that I'm doing, and it's just actually simple. I actually know what she's talking about, and it's very easy to implement. So yeah, it was kind of a moment of, this is weird. How did we both land here?
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how Austin is. I know Austin is a fairly, in the context of Texas, Austin is one of the more progressive cities, and so more likely to adopt this sort of plant-based sort of thing. Are you getting any pressure? Are you seeing any of that around you with your community, or people saying, "Oh, it's bad for the environment to eat meat, and how dare you do that type of stuff"? Are you getting any pushback either that or on social media or anything like that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, there's a lot about that, and I'd be curious, to hear some of the input that you have on it too. But there's definitely a lot of people saying, not so much in Austin really, because there's a pretty evenly split community, I would say, between, let's say, vegan or whatever. But when I am around those that are vegan or don't believe in carnivore, it's kind of like you're how is that sustainable? There's not, how can you possibly expect the entire world to go to that? Or plants are good for people, right? We've always had plants in our diet, this and that. Or don't you understand the science behind red meat and cancer studies and all of those sort of pushback objections that one would get has been something that I've noticed.
Well, my answer is, yeah, I understand the science very well, and I see the science is very, very poorly done, and there's a lot of science that doesn't suggest that, and I think if you look at the overall, as we get healthier and healthier, which we undoubtedly do, the likelihood that that makes you more likely to get disease is just completely nonsensical, and so that's deal there. I've never come out and said everybody in the world needs to go on a carnivore diet. Like I said, I think even most people don't need to do that. But there is, there's always that's the straw man argument. Well, everybody in the world can't do it. Who's asking for that? No one is. Let the people that want to do that, and not, because if you were forced to eat, and they said, hey, Lauren, you're not allowed to have meat anymore. You can only have it once a week. What would that do to you personally?
That would make me probably spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to answer it. Like, being carnivore allows me to be very straightforward in what I'm eating and know that it's good. Because I had that history of disordered eating, I get to apply this and it's very easy. And I just know what I'm going to eat, what I'm going to get, how much I'm going to spend. So without that, I would be figuring out where to recoup my nutrition, how to avoid all of the ingredients that you get in foods in general it's not meat. Gosh, how much money to spend on the food that's like vegetables and all that. It all adds up because you're not as full, at least in my experience. So it's a lot more money that I would be looking into, maybe, even though that's counterintuitive to a lot of people, for a lot of people, but all of those things would come into question. And then just kind of like, also, the other beauty of carnivore that my sister and I were talking about is, like, we never have to worry about being overweight again. You just do this. You just implement it for like a few weeks, a month, and a few months, and you're back to feeling strong and looking good. So it would be kind of like this overall anxiety of just like, oh man, I want to look the way I want to look. How am I going to make this happen the way I want to? That's easy, that I was doing before.
Yeah. And for some people, particularly those with debilitating disease where they found effectively a cure in diet, not being able to access that would obviously there'd be a lot of people that would suffer needlessly and not be too happy about it, nor would I. As far as you said you can eat as much as you want. You said you're 5'8", 145 pounds or something like that. How much are you eating a day? Are you eating like 2 pounds of meat a day, or what would you eat? How much typically?
Yeah, I am having around, I want to say, about 2 pounds of meat a day. Breakfast is about 5 strips of bacon or so, maybe 4, and then usually 4 eggs. I'm pretty good with that for 6 hours, 7 hours sometimes. And the longer I go into carnivore, right, the less food I need, really. So that's standard pretty much every day. And then I'll usually have 1 to 1.5 pounds of beef for dinner. And I just do ground beef. So for me, that works well. It's kind of why I was asking for you and your opinion about just having that, if that's enough nutrient wise. And yeah, it's at least 1.5 pounds a day, if not 2. I don't think I ever push it past that. Sometimes I implement grapes in there. For me, if I have a sweet tooth, which is not necessarily carnivore, I understand that. That's just been something I've gone in and out of. But I do notice that when I have sugar, it makes me want a little bit more. I don't know if that'll ever go away. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think carbohydrates in general blunt our satiety effect. And there's a number of studies that look at that versus cholecystokinin, GLP-1, other things that seem to blunt that. So it helps you to eat more. That's why a lot of athletes use it to get into a caloric excess, because it's easier to do on carbohydrates. And so it's more or less acts as an appetite stimulant for some people, for many people, in fact. And so it'll probably be there.
Sorry, on that, quick question on fruit. Do you have an opinion on it? Like, for athletes like yourself, do you supplement much to give you that kind of boost?
I don't. You know, like I said, I just don't. I feel I function just fine without it, and so I haven't had any reason to do that. I certainly, you know, like I said, I don't begrudge anybody that wants to do that and see how it does for them. I just, it's not for me. I can just say that, and it's athletics or depending on what your sport is. I mean, you know, you could argue that humans are not designed to be giant, Mr. Olympia size bodybuilder people. I mean, so maybe the physiology has to be different for that. Maybe we're not designed to run ultra marathons. I mean, some people like to do that. They can
Right.
have that. I've got no desire to run for 100 miles. you know, I get bored of that. But yeah, I mean, I think for certain people that it's certainly fine. For other people, probably a lot of people, particularly people with insulin resistance, and that becomes problematic. Certainly after a certain degree, at least. And some people, it's tough. Like I said, it's tough to just eat one grape. I mean, no one wants to do
Yeah.
that. I mean, you got your at least 10 or 20 of them or something like that. And so, and for some people, it's just more and more and more. It leads to these other things. So you just have to know yourself and know your body and know how you respond to that stuff. And if you can moderate it, in some cases, it's fine. Many people can't. There's these abstainers and moderators, and some people need to abstain from that stuff. And so, has there been anything so surprising you found when you did the diet, like you weren't expecting? Like, wow, this changed for me, and I didn't really expect that.
I would say that my mood went up. I was mainly looking at it from like a food standpoint
Mhm.
because I had such a history of disordered. It's a lot of work to have a disordered eating pattern, honestly. It's a lot of brain power. So I was kind of like, man, let's try this thing because my friend had tried it. Um, what I was happy with was that I lost 10 pounds. I wasn't necessarily so surprised by that because I knew it was not very many, no carbs. That's kind of helped out with that way. But the mood thing, I was like waking up. My mood was just really positive, clarity in my just thoughts in a lot of ways. So like, I don't know if the right word is focus, but just kind of clarity. Similar to when I stopped drinking alcohol, like a few months after that, there was a lot of clarity that came. And it was similar to that, probably weaning off those foods that were affecting me, my gut. So that was nice. The waking up early without anything was crazy. Just like, so you kind of just wake up and you're in a good mood. You're already pretty uplifted and bright because your energy is up. And all around, that was surprising. That whole experience there was really strange because you would think you would need more sugar or something to get you there. And you just didn't. I didn't need that.
Yeah, it is. It is interesting. Because a lot of people talk about, well, you could lose weight anyway, just get in a caloric deficit, and that, generally is largely true. But the other thing is all these other additional things that seem to happen: the cognitive benefits, the skin, all the things that we see that are there. How about digestively? Did you notice any changes in your digestive system? Because a lot of people, I mean, again, I see a lot of girls, or sorry, young women on social media talking about how bloated they are and how normal that is. And was that something you'd struggled with? And did you notice a difference with that?
Okay, so I'm glad you brought that up because it brings up a whole other thing that I was forgetting. Yeah, so gut issues. So I had I would eat one little grape or a nut or whatever, and it would be first thing in the morning. You're not bloated, and then give it 10 minutes, and I looked like I was like 6 months pregnant. And that was from a history, I think, of having disordered eating, but also just my microbiome was really off and I knew it. So anything I was eating was just causing inflammation. I was just inflamed all the time, but it would cause me to bloat. And so when I started eating carnivore, I was shocked, truly. That was one of the best things at how there was no bloating at all, ever. So I was eating as much as I wanted, more. I was being, in your words, comfortably stuffed, right? And having as much as I wanted, losing weight, not having any bloating whatsoever. And I noticed that talking about health specifically, not just food patterns that improve, but like health, my gut dramatically improved. Dramatically. So everything, my bowel movements, I had struggled. Like sometimes I would think I would go a week and just have one, which was a very common thing for me. I was like, that's clearly not right. And so once I got into this pattern of eating carnivore, I was having regular bowel movements that were just like consistent and wasn't bloated. And you can feel when your gut is healthy. I don't know how to explain it really, but there's just a feeling of like like homeostasis, I don't know, it's homeostasis or something like that, that all around your body is functioning right. So that was a massive improvement.
Yeah, I know for me, when I went from a ketogenic diet, which had lots of, leafy greens and salads and all this stuff, years, 7, 8 years ago, to carnivore, it was just, it was almost like an absence of noticing digestion. I didn't notice I was digesting anything anymore.
Yeah.
It was just so like, and even, today I can sit down and eat 2, 3 pounds of meat and literally I'm like, I don't even feel like I've got anything in my stomach at all. It's so
Yeah.
comfortable and I can go exercise pretty much almost immediately afterwards. So
Wow.
that is a real benefit. You had mentioned, electrolytes in the beginning.
Mhm.
Is that something you still supplement? Do you worry about salt or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, as far as electrolytes, I was getting magnesium, potassium, and salt in the beginning for all of those, that transition phase. I noticed that was necessary for my trail running that I was talking to you about, and also just cramping. As I've gone into it further, I haven't needed the electrolytes as much. When I did implement fruit, that was something that I have heard through other doctors and here and there that that could help supplement for electrolytes. The longer I stay in carnivore, no, I don't really supplement with them. But as I transition into it, if I go back from animal based, I do tend to supplement with electrolytes. I'd be curious as to your, like, do you still supplement yourself with those, or is that something that you need to at this
Well, I
point?
mean, I do, and it's because I'm always exercising hard and sweating a lot, and I think you tend to lose that, so I do that. But like I said, I think once you go carnivore, and particularly if you're coming from a standard American diet where you get just an enormous amount of sodium in all the processed food, you eliminate that, and then all of a sudden you're on a relatively low sodium diet. So by adding a little bit back in, a lot of people feel better. Not everybody. There's some people do carnivore without any salt at all, which is something I don't know that I would enjoy that.
Sounds horrible.
But so well, some people do. Some people and they like it, and there's other people that do different ways. I'm not going to say one way is perfect and one way is not. I think you find your own thing. But yeah, I mean, I think particularly again when we talk about doing athletics, again, do humans need to do athletics? Probably not. I mean, there's a balance between being totally sedentary, which most of society has become, versus becoming an extreme sort of athlete. And there's probably you need to get some level of regular activity, and how much is too much, hard to say. I mean, I'm like I said, I'm wired that way. I like competing. That's who I am. Who I'll always be. So I find that's helpful to me. Are you concerned about heart disease? Because this is always a thing that people will come up, and say, "Hey, it sounds great. I'm worried about heart disease." What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So I have an interesting take on that, actually, as of recent. So my mom passed away about a month ago, and she had heart disease in her family. So that was a major contributing factor to her passing, and my grandpa had that as well. So it's something that absolutely is top of mind, for one side of my family that I pay attention to. It's actually one of the reasons why I'm interested in this, is because I feel, based off the research that I've done and looking into all of this, that it actually it helps with heart disease. And that's another reason why I also decided to stop drinking, in part was just for my health in general. So yeah, it's very much a thing that I pay attention to. And I'm always curious to see, the more information that comes out about this, because I don't see that the system that we have today is effective whatsoever. And that's one of the reasons that I became a carnivore coach. I think so much of heart disease comes down to the food that we eat, and what our lifestyle looks like combined with that. So that's sort of where I'm going with it. I see carnivore as a very effective mechanism to prevent heart disease or to turn something around.
Yeah, yeah, I don't disagree. I think that when we look at the risk factors for cardiovascular disease, they're far more than just what your LDL cholesterol is or your ApoB, amount is, and so hypertension, diabetes, obesity, metabolic syndrome, chronic inflammation, all those things, which almost always get better on carnivore, which is interesting to see, and all these risk factors improve, and whether or not your LDL goes up or not, may or may not increase your risk. It's still debatable. There's some studies out there looking at that, but I think Certainly you're improving quality of life. And I think that's an important, very important aspect of what we need to do, because we got so many people that are suffering from that. I don't even know what you do for a living or anything like that, but what are your plans over the next, do you have plans on doing anything over the next few years, or what are your goals?
I am trying to help as many people as I can with their food, with their through learning about this myself. So this is a massive focus of mine, is learning as much as I can about carnivore, and then helping to educate others through my experience is really important to me, because I think that so many people are, well, I know how I was living for so many years. And I think so much of it came down from what I was eating or not eating. So many people have anxiety, struggles, depression, they're overweight, whatever it is. So figuring this out to help myself and then help other people is a main goal of mine. I'm currently working, I recently moved to the corporate life in terms of a job, just to experience it. So director of sales at Indeed, and been working there for a little while. It's been nice, it's a great company. Just kind of seeing what that looks like, but taking that information as well to kind of catapult myself into another direction after a few years to further help people with that knowledge as well, is something that I want to pull from this moving forward.
Very good. Nice. Well, we are coming to a close on the time we have allotted to us. So let me ask you, do you have you're coaching, so where do people go to find you if they're interested in chatting more, learning more about you, or getting some help from you? Where do they go?
Yeah, they can likely just find me on YouTube. My name is Lauren Knight Hughes. It's a long name. Lauren Knight, Knight Hughes, Hughes. Instagram is lknight_h. It's kind of where I just talk to people personally and help them out a little bit more one-on-one. And yeah, always can email me there as well. You can see my email on my YouTube channel, but super always learning and curious about all of this stuff, and just really excited about the opportunities that it's brought me and other people going forward. It's exciting.
Well, awesome. Thank you for being willing to share your story and being open enough to try this. Like, a lot of people, because I think a lot of people, particularly in your sort of demographic, younger women are sort of sucked into this plant-based narrative. They message, they try to take advantage of people's compassionate side and show them a picture of a cute pig and say, oh my God, how can you dare? And, you're an animal abuser and all this nonsense. So good for you for resisting that. A lot of people don't,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Well, it's definitely something I think that we all have to get there on our own journey. Right. And I think for so many for women, you're taught, to your point, that salads are good and vegetables, and just have the keto snacks and those things. And the reality is whole food is good. Eat until you're full, have a lot of protein, have a lot of fat. Fat's not going to make you fat. Make sure that you're limiting the amount of just the processed foods. And also it's okay to be muscular. I think a lot of girls are still shifting into that. And you just want to be happy at the end of the day, and you're going to feel better.
Yeah, good for you. Yeah, good for you. And I think women should do strength training and put some strength on them. Perfect. Okay, guys. Thank you so much, Lauren.